the main political issue in the country at the moment is corruption. This has been the main point of discussion for people in South Africa for a long time now, partly because, yes, there's been this corrupt regime in place, but it plays on this idea that some people are getting unfair access, some people are getting preferential access, and in a country that still has incredibly high levels of inequality, that really rankles with the population. And so this idea that against a corrupt government has been something that has really played on for a long time within the kind of sphere of political debate in South Africa. So the new president that's coming in, Cyril Ramaphosa, is the first thing that he's got to do really is to show and demonstrate to people that he's doing something about corruption within the system. The ANC, the ruling party, the African National Congress, has over the last 10 years the level of corruption and patronage and graft at the top of the party has become so pervasive that this was the cause for Jacob Zuma to be removed from office. But at the same time, that corruption isn't just at the top of the party, it stems from the top all the way down to the bottom, and at a local level there's still this connection between having access to political resources means that people then get access to economic resources, and where there are very few opportunities in rural areas, people will seek political office as a way of enriching themselves, and that's something that's going to be much more difficult for them to be able to tidy up.
Are there many European players in South Africa who trigger these processes of corruption?
Trigger the processes of corruption? Well, there are organised crime connections between Europe and South Africa. In terms of kind of what's been happening in the more formal public debates, if you look at the work being done by Lord Hayne here in the UK, has been very vocal within the UK Parliament in making sure that any kind of UK companies or any global companies that have been complicit in the specific corruption allegations around the Gupta brothers and what's been described as state capture in South Africa, he's been at the forefront of bringing this to light, and so there's a number of investigations into global companies who have been complicit in these actions.
And you mentioned that racial cohesion is still there, so what processes are happening?
So South Africa is still incredibly structurally unequal, and the economic problems that persist are largely around racial lines. It's about access into formal jobs, it's about access into getting those opportunities, and it's still largely, although no longer legislated on, but it's still largely structured around racial lines, and this is something that under Jacob Zuma was perhaps played upon, and this rhetoric around white monopoly capital, and under his presidency the kind of rhetoric that was used was very divisive, and this wasn't new for under Zuma. This is something that Mbeki had also been a lot of racialized rhetoric, and Mbeki was seen as perhaps undoing some of the unifying work of Mandela, but this continued under Jacob Zuma. And I think that whereas the hope for Cyril Ramaphosa is that he can truly unify people. So if you look at his speeches so far as president, even though he's only been there for a few days now, his initial speeches have emphasised unity, emphasised togetherness, emphasised kind of, all of us South Africans, and that's going to be what I think one of his main messages is going to be, alongside the corruption issue, is this idea of reunifying the country and reunifying the party as well.
What do you think could be done to revitalise the political climate in South Africa?
So he'll have to make sure that, well, first of all, he'll have to hold the party together. And there are still people within the ruling ANC who come from that side of the party that supported Jacob Zuma and supported Zuma's favoured successor, his ex-wife, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. So in the first instance, he's going to have to make sure that anything he does maintains the unity of the party, so he can't move against these people too quickly. At the same time, that's a very fine line between appeasing those elements within the party who could potentially cause issues within the organisation and demonstrating to voters that he is doing enough on curbing corruption and tackling the corruption that's pervasive within the system. So politically, that's going to be his main challenge, and that's going to be the big balance of whether or not he can convince the electorate that he is moving against corruption in a way that also appeases those within the party. The initial it initially looks like he's going to, or he is doing that quite well. He's moved on Zuma, and Zuma's been removed from office, and he's going to. There's going to be a review of leadership of the National Prosecuting Authority. So I think that a lot of the rhetoric so far has been very positive and very much welcomed by the population. Aside from that issue, the main thing that he's going to have to deliver on is the economy, and he's now got up until a lead up into an election in the kind of first half of next year. He's got this lead up time to that to really demonstrate to people that he can deliver on their expectations around economic recovery and make a difference to people's lives. One of the things that was under debate under the last administration was legislation perhaps curbing some of those press freedoms. At the same time, there have been a number of press outlets who have in part claimed Zuma's removal from office as perhaps their victory, and it was perhaps a victory of the free press and investigative journalism. This is something that kind of holds true. There is within South Africa a very kind of long-standing history of quality investigative journalism. And so the way in which the party now responds to that, whereas in the past they may have sought to curb that, may start to see a new approach to that and an encouragement of it, because I think that in South Africa it's still very much seen as it's a very young democracy, and one of the key pillars of that democracy is the free press and is a renewed strength within civil society as well.
And what do you think could be done to unite the society?
I think it's an intergenerational thing. It's about exposure, and it's about education. It's a tricky one. There's no easy solution in South Africa, sadly. The social discourse is incredibly complex and incredibly nuanced, and there's not an easy solution. But it is about education, and it is, I think, about making sure that all elements of society feel that they have, in some part, ownership of that society and ownership of the economy. And this is something that these are structural issues that have been there for a couple of hundred years. Around who owns what and around the way in which the economy is structured. So it's not, these structures don't get taken down easily, but it's something that in time will come. Now, whether that comes under an ANC government or whether it comes under another government, we'll yet see. But this is a long-term project, and I think that South Africa is democratization in South Africa is a long-term project that while there may have been, some would say derailed, some would say deferred over the last 10 years, there's a real hope within South Africa. I think that's one of the most encouraging things, is that there's still this belief. I think that people can make it work.